Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Weirdly Magical podcast with Jen and Lou. And I am Lou, astrologer and writer of modern astrology, Harness the Stars for Your Soul's True Purpose, available on Amazon.
And I'm Jen. I'm an Akashic healer, numerologist, and creator of the Illuminating Journey Cards, which are available at jenduchenne.com/illuminating journey cards.
So today we are talking about the energy of the Pisces New Moon that's coming up on March the 6th and the energy leading up to and around it. I would like to introduce my owl above me. I am channeling Pallas Athena today because Pallas Athena is very involved in the early astrology of this year. Well, for the first half of the year, really, and Jen and I are planning on doing a teaching about Pallas Athena. So watch this space for that. But one of her totems or symbols, or whatever you want to call it, is the owl of wisdom. And since Pallas Athena is exactly conjunct Jupiter, my ruling planet, and this new moon is squaring my Jupiter, I figured it was really appropriate. So anyway, Jen's pulled a couple of cards to kind of kick us off before we start looking at the astrology and talking about that.
Yes, so the first card is one of the tools, and it's called Light, and this is a double terminated crystal, quartz crystal, which with the tools you get to decide what it means to you. So even those who can't see it, you can imagine it. It brings light. What does light mean to you? And as far as bringing light, so I get the sense that this new moon is about bringing light into our kind of fog or our delusion. And then I actually pulled 3 cards because I was looking for a soul portal. We got a second tool, which this one is liquid. And so this is a bottle that actually says on it, potion for motion. And it's very interesting because Pisces is a water sign. It is all about water and liquid. And what happens when you add liquid? Water is also the only energy or whatever you want to call it, body that we know of that changes its form by through what do you call it? Through temperature, exactly. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. My brain is floating. So it can be ice, it can be water, liquid, steam, whatever. And water shows us how to kind of ice up what we don't want or what we are putting to sleep, and to liquidize and move through things. So, it's a great idea of using water to help you get into the flow. And then the third card, which is the 11th soul portal. And for those who can't see it, this is a very colorful card with a woman standing between 2 pillars. These are sacred pillars from one of the sacred places in England. And she has roots growing out of her feet. So she's planting roots, and her third eye is open to these lightning bolts that are coming through. So what I see in it, it's almost like she's in the shower, in this rainbow shower of receiving information and allowing it to be conducted through her body and creating the sense of grounding, which is where I believe we are, or what we're experiencing right now. And it's interesting that we have an 11, right? Because we have some 29 degrees at this new moon.
And then incidentally, for those that can't see, the either side of her, to the corners of the card, there are crystals to go back to that light card again. So
Right. And there's a bird.
Oh, there is a bird as well. Yeah,
it's a full moon. But this is about really beginning to bring in the information we receive, so that we do become the wholeness of who we are. So we're not distracted by what other people are telling us. It's very, to me, this is about finding your truth and knowing it and focusing on it, so you can be who you came here to be.
Which is the point of everything, really. So, in my opinion.
Indeed.
And what I work with in the astrology, and what Jen works with, I think, as well, with her work. So to kind of to look at the new moon. Okay, the new moon itself is at 15 degrees and 47 minutes of Pisces, conjunct Neptune and Vesta, who are both at 16 degrees of Pisces. This new moon is sextile to Mars in Taurus at 13 degrees, and Saturn in Capricorn at 18 degrees. The new moon is also square to, and I consider it to be square to Jupiter and Ceres in Sagittarius, partly because we've got the ongoing Jupiter-Neptune square throughout 2019, and also because it really falls, the square falls at the midpoint of where Jupiter and Ceres are in Sagittarius, kind of pulling them together. So I'm going to say it's square to those two as well. Also, for this new moon, well, I'm sure we'll talk about other things, but within the 24 hours before the new moon, Mercury turns retrograde. So the new moon is at, and I'm talking universal time, so London time, is on March the 6th at 4:04 p.m. On March the 5th at 8 p.m., Mercury turns retrograde at 29 degrees of Pisces, so yet another Pisces energy. Early the next day, on the 6th at 6:13 a.m. Universal time, Uranus moves into Taurus for the start of a new 84-year cycle. So it's kind of, there's what I would say overall for this new moon is, oh my, changes are coming. Now this is the this is the sixth of 7 new moons at 15 degrees. The first one was back in October at 15 degrees of Libra, and the last one will be in April at 15 degrees of Aries, at the exact opposite point. And that's the cardinal points, Aries and Libra, which are being triggered over and over and over and over and over this year, and about our identity, the I, me, axis of Aries, and the we of Libra. So I find it very interesting that these new moons, 7 of them, start and end at an opposite point. So there's that too. Pisces itself is a mutable sign, so change. 15 degrees is the middle degree of the signs, and I always think of that as a change point because it's kind of the pivot point of the degree, the fulcrum, if you like. So what else do I want to say about the actual kind of degrees? Not a lot for now, but it's huge. You know, the fact that Mercury turns retrograde within 24 hours before. Mercury retrograde, you know, I'm never one to really kind of make a huge thing of Mercury retrograde because it happens so often and it spends so much of its time retrograde. But the fact that this Mercury retrograde entered the point of its shadow, conjunct Neptune. Neptune is conjunct this new moon. It turns retrograde at the very last degree and spends its whole time in Pisces and ends up turning direct conjunct Neptune. And Neptune rules Pisces. I kind of think this time is so Piscean, so Neptunian, that we can't ignore the Mercury retrograde being associated with this new moon. And then, of course, the shift of Uranus into Taurus is huge. So we'll look at all that amongst other things. So, Jen, do you want to kick off with the numbers? Because there's so much.
So this is indeed so much that my mind's just kind of going all over with the numbers. The 15 degrees of the new moon, which of course, as you mentioned, has been going, and it's 7 times. I think the 7 is a key number because it's been showing up a lot, and I've been told this is related to our transit, if you will. The 7 is actually related to the transit we're experiencing right now, and the 7 is a number that makes us go inward and research who we are, come back to our values, our wisdom, our truth. And so it helps us to break down some of the illusion. And of course, we have to be involved in breaking it down. So I find that fascinating because in terms of Neptune or Pisces, or whatever, this is very much a sign about music and taking that depth in, and spirituality. So there is that sense of wisdom, and of course remembering that Pisces, the original ruler was Jupiter. So there is that similarity between the 7 or 700 as the actual number 7, that and Pisces, which I find kind of fascinating. And here we have Neptune at 16 degrees, which is a 7 as well. So this is a highly intuitive number, a highly intuitive time. So we are being called back to ourselves. And the only way we find ourselves back at ourselves is by engaging with our intuition, finding that that point within us where we kind of unlock the key, if you will. We turn that ice that's inside of us into liquid. We heat up the temperature so we can begin to connect in truth. Because I think for a lot of people, and certainly I've had this experience, it's about kind of being frozen around things that are true to me because it didn't work in the world. Like, oh, people said you're crazy, or you should be locked up, or they would lock us up in a sense, right? Create some kind of prison against our feelings. So this idea of being liberated by our connection to intuition and understanding our connection to the universe helps us, that we can do all of that in the water, which is fascinating, or in some form of water. So it's this, and being with Neptune being next to Vesta, I think at 16 degrees, this, like I said, it's a highly intuitive number that's asking us to really trust our intuition and allow whatever needs to fall or break down to follow its natural route, because we tend to want to hold things so that they don't change. I don't want things to change. I feel safe, with my frozen heart or my frozen spirituality. So there's this fiery energy that's coming through to kind of, what does water do? It takes the things away that or moves us away from what we're clinging on to. So if we're clinging on to these rocks or these old ideas, it's kind of forcing us away. So we have to choose something different. So that's fascinating. And then the 15 is fascinating too, because the 15 is known as the spiritual alchemy, the number of spiritual alchemy. So this is about healing, and so is Pisces. This is about the healing of ourselves, the healing of our world, just like you were talking about, Lou, that idea between the individual and community or relationships. When we heal ourselves, we begin to heal the world. If we're going around telling everyone else what to do, but we're not doing it ourselves, we're creating greater separation. So this number is also a number of love and of service. It's like the recognition of the self and being willing to change or morph, which is a very Neptunian word, right? Morpheus, the idea of going into the deep sleep or waking up from the deep sleep. And we're actually in a 15 universal month for March. So there's a double 15 we have here, a double 6. 6 is considered a pregnant woman. If you look at the shape of the 6, it's like a woman who's pregnant. And it also brings the 1 and the 0 together, which is the male and female energy. So it is about rebirth, right? It's about death and rebirth. I mean, Pisces is a rebirth number as well, when we're being freed from our prison. I read somewhere that Pisces is also about feet, which I didn't know was about feet, but that makes sense, right? Are your feet like locked, or if we think about the world underwater, right? We have all these creatures who don't have feet.
Like swimming.
That's right. They're swimming. They don't have feet, so they're flowing with it. And what are we doing with our feet? Are we walking away from the illusion and delusion and the prison-like idea, or are we, trapped, staying trapped? So that's kind of a fascinating idea, that when we use love as an idea, not to control others, but to really be open with who we are and show ourselves for who we are in that vulnerable way, then we probably have better relationships, not because people don't have stuff on us or whatever, but because we're sharing it first, so we have the power. And also because we don't care about it anymore. Because when we hide things, which is also very much this energy, then we're always worried that somebody's going to find out about us, or they're going to blackmail us. Like we have all this going on in the world, right? All these people who have been blackmailed or paid off, these are all kind of the same energy. So when we apply the principle of being connected to ourselves, being open to change, and we use love as our guide, that idea of loving the people, loving the world we're in, and loving ourselves, creating or speaking from our truth, we are empowered.
But before we look at the other numbers, let's stay in that little block for now. Just those four, because we could probably do a whole podcast on just those four. Because here we have, the moon is our emotional body, really at an individual level. The sun, you could sum it up as the ego or our core self. And then Neptune ruling Pisces. Jen has talked a lot about that. The other words for it are, I always think of it as the amniotic fluid energy, the chaotic kind of time before birth, after birth, or after death rather. Also the cosmic soup is another one. All these words just kind of give the feeling of this Piscean Neptunian energy as being so fluid, but very confusing as well. And chaotic is another word. I always like that word, but I know it causes panic in a lot of people, but I mean it in a very nice way. And then Vesta is, I have a lovely image in my head of Vesta from going to the British Museum with my daughters last October. There was a statue of one of the Vestal Virgins with this kneeling, in this kneeling pose with a veil over her face where you could see her face, but then holding the eternal flame in her hands just forward. It's like kind of this focus of I'm holding all that you need really within me. And that's what Vesta is for. She's kind of the keeper of the flame, the keeper of she keeps the culture alive, really. It was said that if the flame went out, it was allowed to go out by the Vestal Virgins, that Rome would fall. And incidentally, water puts flame out. So all creates steam.
Yes, well, it's very interesting because, the hearth, I always think about it as the keeper of the hearth, which is, the basis or the heart of who we are, right? The basis of our community, the way we live is to do with keeping the flame alive. So really the flame is within us, right? And so how do we kind of turn the flame up, because it's been, iced down, it's been frozen. So this is that moment to kind of bring it alive. And of course, when you apply water and fire to things, you make something new, right? So there is all of that.
Yeah, there's so many meanings. It's just like, it's just kind of amazing, really. And I just think this is amazingly spiritual, this new moon. I actually find it quite funny that we're recording this the day after the Oscars, and and I say that because Neptune and Pisces energy is about film as well, and glamour and all that kind of thing. And here we have this year with this focus building. We have the first Oscars where there was no host because things falling apart, and also there's all kinds of controversy now about the film that won. I'm not going to go into that. I'm sure people can look into that themselves. But there's all this kind of confusion and chaos about all that kind of energy, and a dissolving of boundaries too, and old ways. That's a very Neptunian Piscean word. So all this is happening. Illusions and delusion will be happening, but also dissolving of old illusions is going to be happening.
Yes, and what springs to mind as what you're talking about is I feel this is kind of the flame, or we're lighting the flame to having a different relationship with love, a different relationship with the people around us and ourselves, right? Because when we know we are connected, divinely connected, we don't have to run around in fear and try to imprison others or stay in prison or stay quiet even, right? This is the controversy aspect of confusion or chaos or disruption, whatever you want to call it, is there's a controversy that has to happen. And to me, that kind of sums up the idea of this, especially with Mercury going retrograde at 29 degrees, which is the critical degree. So of course it adds an extra element. Not only is it a critical degree, but it is the final degree of the final sign, which is pretty incredible for this, And when we think about Mercury being our messenger of our mind, so it's like really blowing our mind open. And I feel like at the same time, we are having this, when you were talking about the 15, it's this idea, when we hit that degree of the 15, we're in the middle. So we're deepening into something, right? Because we've kind of played around and we felt around. Now we're going into that deeper aspect of this experience. We really are growing up and we're taking responsibility in a new way, which allows us to change shape, to morph, to understand that our spiritual aspects, or the way we think about spirituality, is really what controls how we live. And so by having the boundaries that we choose, instead of being, because there's that boundlessness, there's like no end when you're in water, when you're in flow, that you can create the boundaries you desire that are connected to your intuition and your belief structure, as opposed to accepting the boundaries of others.
And this energy is going to continue pretty much all through March, not only because it's a new moon, but because Mercury is going to retrograde all the way back to to where the new moon is, well, to actually where Neptune is, but pretty much where new moon is, and is going to kind of trigger all these other aspects that we have going on as well. So to mention those, the new moon and Neptune and Vesta are sandwiched right in the middle of an aspect to Mars in Taurus and Saturn in Capricorn, as I said. And now they are very masculine energies, really. Mars and Saturn, anyway. Earth signs are feminine. So the planets, they are kind of the archetypal male energies in the chart. Mars, the warrior, and then Saturn, the elder, the father, and all that. And here we have this dissolving spiritual agape kind of love energy right in the middle of those two, and the two of them in earth signs, in feminine signs. It's almost like this is being dissolved as well, this energy, or it's an opportunity to dissolve it. Because I always think of the sextile aspect, particularly, which the new moon is making to Mars and Saturn, as an opportunity aspect. It's not got a lot of, whereas the squares and oppositions have a lot of energy behind them to change. The sextile's more of a, I'll give you this, but you you choose whether you take this chance or not. So there's that. But though I do think that because this is so powerful with all these four energies so close together in the middle of Pisces, I do think it's a strong opportunity to dissolve yet more of our kind of very patriarchal, very paternalistic kind of energy that has been running our cosmology for a long time.
Yes, and I find it very interesting that these two male aspects are given kind of supporting roles as opposed to, being in your face roles.
Yeah.
And we also have to remember, because Pisces is about the fishes, right, which is a very, there's so much connected to the fishes, and the idea behind it, of feeding others and feeding ourselves and nourishing ourselves. And also the fish has been connected to the patriarchy in the sense of religion, right? There is a whole religious aspect that has been kind of swallowed by religion. And so in a sense, having these two masculine energies offering up, right, some energy towards the dissolving. To me, it all feels like, because of all of this, I feel like there's going to be a lot of stuff coming forward, right? Like this idea of more stuff, yes, but more tangible. Even though we're in the this dissolution, we're going to, and maybe also we are disillusioned by what we've imagined has been something wonderful, and now all the dirt and all the kind of garbage is rising up. So we get to see some really dirty, ugly, horrible things that have been kind of hidden under the water. And it feels very much, could be the religious aspect, drug aspect, even that kind of Me Too aspect. It just feels like all of this is coming to the surface, that people can't keep quiet. It's like I see all these voices, all these mouths like open underwater, kind of screaming. It's like that piece of art, Edvard Munch, The Scream. You remember that? That's kind of what I see. I see this idea. And again, what I'm finding so interesting in myself and my clients and friends around me is this idea that we're presented with all these things, but if we don't like choose to do something, like somebody gives us something and says, this is what's happening. And we're just like, oh, okay. Instead of going, no, I want to do something about, I need to be in charge of my own experience. So therefore I'm going to make a call. I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to reach out and do something different. And so that's the key there, right?
Which is why it's an opportunity. Yeah. I keep saying this in all my daily writings and things. I was like, well, it's not just going to happen unless you take some action. It's kind of funny to do a quick personal story. Chiron has just moved into Aries, and from where Mercury is turning retrograde at, and is sitting right on my Aries, third house Aries South Node. So to those that are listening, and Aries third house South Node gives a tendency to be extremely sharp verbally and to cut people at the knees in argument without almost realizing you're doing it, I have to say, because it's your default. And with Chiron being on it, it brought up all that stuff. So I had an opportunity to look at it and to try and do something about changing that default reaction. So it's the same with everything else. We have this opportunity. We still have to choose whether we're going to take that growth opportunity and learn something. And in this case, it's, with this new moon, it's a clear message that we are to choose kind of more an unconditional agape type of love, which is why I said the word agape, that kind of true Christ energy, rather than what's been brought into our psyche by religion. But it's more this kind of unconditional love, which doesn't mean you have to be a doormat, doesn't mean you have to like what everything does, but it kind of means that you love them anyway, despite and you love you know, you just should treat everybody lovingly. So yeah.
And kindly. And I think that's, that's a great story. And also having to remember that every one of these aspects has 3 levels, right? There's the level of the child. And remember, we talked about the 15, which means we're moving beyond that child into the kind of, the middle phase, and then the more mature phase. You decide where you are and what you want to do, but you don't have to stay in the bondage of people saying, well, this is what it does, Mars is about anger. But then when we think about the depth of anger, right, what that means, when we talk about the maturity of anger, then that's that moment where we actually make change because we feel connected enough to want to change, but it isn't about the thing that got us angry in the first place, right? We're not putting our energy, our libido on trying to hurt somebody who did something to us. We're putting it towards generational change, because Neptune is a generational sign, right? There's a lot of them we're talking about. Uranus are generational. These are not just momentary experiences. And again, when we go into maturity, then we have that moment to be in stillness, which I think is also very Piscean. When we're going into our love, into being loving, without being a martyr, because that is definitely the aspect of the 6th that is the danger, right? Like, oh, look, I'm doing all this for you, or look how much I'm suffering. We've got to break that bond with suffering, or the idea that we need to suffer to prove to everyone that we're trying hard, or we're pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. Look how much I'm suffering. Look how noble I am. That's all great if you want to do that, but it's not a very effective way for making change. If we're in this moment where we're in a historical time where we actually get to decide how things will go forward, and begin the foundational pieces of building in the Aquarian age, then we have to be proactive. So we have to use the libido, the anger. I just feel like all this stuff that's going to come forward, all this poison that's going to be pouring out into our system, and it could also affect water, the ecology and all these things.
Well, poison is a very Piscean word too.
That's right, it is very much.
I do love the fact you saw Mars in Taurus and Saturn in Capricorn as playing supporting roles, because the more I look at that from that perspective, the kind of more I agree that they're giving us the kind of drive and will to build something, and to create something, rather than just to sit in this kind of pool of martyrdom and victimhood, which is the shadow of Pisces as well. So they're giving us the grounding, they're giving us the again the opportunity to actually create change. And I did want to carry on talking about the age of Aquarius, which Jen already mentioned, because between when we record today, which is February the 25th, and the new moon, Venus will move into Aquarius via a square to Uranus at the last degree of Aries. And the day before, as I've already mentioned, Uranus, which is Aquarius ruler, will move into Taurus, with initial make a mutual reception between the two. In other words, the Venus rules Taurus, Uranus rules Aquarius, and they're each in the other's sign. And Uranus moving into Taurus, this is the first time, I think it was 1935, which we'll look at more later, because it didn't start a most stellar time in our history, but we do have to remember that the rest of the chart is different, so it's not necessarily all going to be the same. But yes. Venus is our values, and of course she's the divine feminine as well. I'm moving into Aquarius, just as Uranus moves into Venus ruled Taurus. Now it's going to bring change, undoubtedly, especially Uranus moving into Taurus, to show the kind of strength of the change. When Uranus moved into Aries, it caused the big tsunami at Fukushima. And undoubtedly Uranus moving into Taurus could bring earthly or earth shaking moves, but it also represents the material world, nature, money, the body. So looking at a personal level, this is going to bring huge changes, and how we kind of treat ourselves, treat our money, treat the material world. The call for the Green New Deal could be ramped up beyond belief with Uranus going into Taurus. This, awareness that we don't have time, that we have to move quickly. Uranus likes to move quickly, sudden change, all that kind of thing. And combined with Venus in Aquarius, I think you're going to find yourself wanting to make big changes in those areas of life.
Yes, everything will be turned upside down. We're going to have an earthquake in the earth in rebellion, and all of us coming to our senses in a sense, right? Because we've been kind of drugged by everything we've experienced and kind of stayed there and said, well, what can I do? I have no power. And now we're like, I don't care about that, right? I have to make the change. What's fascinating to me is with all these changes that are happening, and it's really is ramping up, is that when Mercury goes retrograde at that 29 degrees, right, that critical degree, at that time, Uranus will be at the last points of the 29 in Aries. So there is this kind of gateway, because 29 is an 11, and 11 is this idea of bringing balance into the material world through the spiritual gateway. When we begin to understand that, the power or source of energy that moves us is available to us, but we have to do something with it. We have to access it. We have to choose something different. So it's fascinating that all of this eruption and movement is making us go, well, wait a minute. Our monetary system is probably going to change, because this system we have now is set up so that only a few people are at advantage and everyone else is at disadvantage, just like the idea of imprisoning us in different ways. So it's an interesting thing to understand that with this 11, the 29, the repetition of these critical degrees, we're moving through a gateway. We have an opportunity, like Lou said, to do something different. Like, we don't have to do what we've done before. And it's also about bringing balance into our lives, harmony into the way we live, how we live with others, and looking at the mistakes or whatever you want to call about these kind of darker things that people have done and maybe we have done from a place of compassion. Like, it's not that we need to judge them, but just that we need to decide what do we need to do so we don't have that kind of stuff anymore, as opposed to, you're disgusting. I mean, I certainly think they should be held accountable, but that's, again, this is this opportunity, with all of these changes, and certainly with Uranus going into Taurus, is this opportunity to change the way we hold people accountable and change the way we kind of look at our material goods, because it's all matter, right? When we think about it in terms of matter, we have this word that we say, oh, it doesn't matter, it matters. Really, what is matter? Matter is the material energy. And that is, what are we making matter? Where are we putting our attention? What are we growing? What are we doing with what the earth is showing us? Like, are we changing? And we are. We got all this innovation, which is also very Uranus type of energy, is innovation. So that is very powerful to think about this, all of these energies at the 29. And I think Chiron also is a 29 still.
No, it's not. Believe me, I know. Because it's still conjunct my 0 degree.
Oh, yes, it has. That's right, it's 0. So pretty soon we'll have the 0 matching with the, well, I don't know, pretty soon. Takes a bit of time, but
yeah.
So, yeah, there's the other 0 coming in, still bringing in healing energy, right? the healing, the
Absolutely.
opening, that idea that all of the stuff that comes to the surface, all the sewage that's rising, like what do we do with sewage when it rises to the surface? Like how do we ensure that the water is safe to drink after all of this stuff has risen? So that's a very interesting aspect.
I do want to mention the square to Jupiter and Ceres over in Sagittarius too. Jen already mentioned that, of course, Jupiter was the traditional ruler of Pisces. So we've got kind of all this more energy of faith, belief, idealism, truth, all that kind of stuff coming in from there. But Ceres at 10 degrees of Sagittarius, she's a lot to do with grief and forgiveness. And that really ties in with the themes that we've talked about the love and the unconditional love and the agape kind of energy. Because to come to that place of kind of real kind of unconditional love, really you have to grieve and forgive, or you can't let go of the old. And these themes are showing over and over in the cosmos this year, with the nodes as well, with the North Node being in Cancer, which is another water sign, and it's kind of letting go of kind of the old rules, and then forgiving ourselves. There's a lot to do with forgiveness in water energy anyway. I
Yeah.
could go on and on about that kind of energy.
Right. And the traditional thing that's interesting about Jupiter and Ceres is that they were, couple. They were a couple.
Yes.
Madly in love, and then all this jealousy and stuff arose, and Jupiter actually mistreated Ceres very badly. So they were like, they treated each other very badly, and very angry. And so I think, again, there's an opportunity to change the story. Like, you can stay being angry, but that's not going to give you what you need. Now, Ceres is at 10 degrees, so that's the new beginning, that kind of allowing in the divine energy of, I'm going to do this something different, right? I'm taking an opportunity to practice compassion and removing myself out of what I want somebody else to do. I want somebody to behave a certain way, and they're not doing it. And this is what compassion is all about. This is what, using more balanced love is all about, is recognizing that we can't control other people, by trying to manipulate them. At some point, they're just going to leave. So the best way is to focus on who we are and allow ourselves to be who we are, so they can be who they are. We don't own other people. So interesting. So Ceres at 1 degree, or the 10, Jupiter 22, which is this beautiful degree of, again, it's a master number, and this is about designing the piece, or whatever it is you're creating. So I love that Jupiter's in this double 2, which is also,
Pluto is too, and
yes,
Pluto was another player in the story between Ceres and Jupiter.
that's right. They have been cruel, and I think they remind us, right, that they have been cruel and jealous and treated people badly, and being violent and ugly. And it doesn't mean that they don't have an opportunity to change, right? Again, they can go to the 22, which is the master number of peace. So it is. And you have the double 2, which is about creating balance and finding that place where you fit, creating harmony in there, which is so powerful. And it's a 4, right? So 4 comes back to, what are you making real? It's a material number. It's about bringing inspiration into the earth and making it something real, which is what we're talking about. Using that inspiration, which is very much the Neptunian idea, the Pisces, is using that inspiration. You have 2 fishes. What are you going to do with these 2 fishes? And where's that connecting point between them that holds them together, like holding the reins loosely, that energy. So very powerful. And then Mars, of course, at 13 degrees, which is also a 4. we talked about Mars, but I find it fascinating that 13 is the number of the divine feminine. So coming through that energy, that means that the male energy is coming forward to be of service, to disrupt for the sake of new foundations for what matters. So there's a lot of that energy and those kind of patriarchal signs, right? That is about bringing peace, bringing harmony, or and not that it's going to all happen at once, but definitely, we have to kind of focus on that in order for it to begin to happen.
And kind of the last thing I want to talk about in the astrology is that you will talk more about this next time, but it's really starting to be activated by this time this new moon comes about, is the cardinal grand cross between Eris, Pallas Athena opposing each other in Aries and Libra, back to those signs again, and squaring the moon's nodes, but with the moon's south node at 25 Capricorn conjunct Pluto and Saturn. That, I said change is coming. This cardinal grand cross is initiating more change, especially because it's square to the lunar nodes. We're kind of being asked to really let go of the old rules. But also, I saw an interesting post by, what's his name? Oh, astrologer Michael Lutein. He's an interesting guy. His posts are always very cryptic. But this one was like, if your eye's on the prize, you're going to be left feeling hollow or something like that, he said. And that, to my mind, is a lot to do with what all this energy is moving towards as well. In other words, if you are stuck in the old ways of blind ambition and more material world just for the sake of it, and all that kind of stuff that we've been taught to think is important, you're going to be left feeling very hollow, because the energy is all moving towards this collective caring and knowing that we're all connected and needing something more fulfilling than just all that kind of, well, go for the bigger job, go for the bigger house, go for this, go for that. I'm not saying you can never have a big house, but if that's all you're going for, you're going to be left feeling very hollow. And that reminds me of all this chart as well. So
yes, indeed. I think it's a fascinating thing. To me, what I find interesting about this is that that gateway, that opportunity. We didn't really talk, but we have before, that the fact that Uranus and Chiron, as you mentioned, is at the double zero. Of course, the 29 degree is the final degree. The double zero or zero is the first degree, or the one before, right? So endings and beginnings. So we know this is a huge time of change and being in that soup and making choices and remembering, like, the thing is, if we don't speak up, which is what this chart is talking to me about, is the idea is, if we don't listen to our intuition, if we don't speak up, there will be people who will try to trap us back into that same place. And so it could work for a time, right? We have to be outspoken. We have to understand our values. And the only way we can do it is by speaking out, by listening, by paying attention, by choosing something different. It just isn't going to be, there isn't going to be all these signs on the walls going this way, just go this way, press this button and all will be well. There's an urgency here in waking us up. It's this deluge, we're being flooded with water, and what are we focusing on? If, like Lou says, you hanging on to that rock, that if I have this great job, everything will be well, is, I don't think you will just only will you be empty, there will be nothing, because those things are all going to be swept away. In terms of those being the ways we are building something new. Like, yes, you may have a big house, I don't know, but I think, the energies are going to being more responsible
Mhm.
for ourselves, more responsible for the choices we make and the way we live in this world. That is, we are visitors here. I mean, we don't own all these things, right? We have to be in conjunction with it, with the earth. And so I just feel this huge energy of kind of like a warning, if you will, of um, just don't be too complacent and too simple in the idea of why are you doing what you're doing? Like, you really need to get to the bottom of it and find that connection.
Core values.
Yes, values. What do you value? What is your spiritual truth?
Yeah.
I read somewhere that somebody was saying how with Mercury, it's so interesting that Mercury is going retrograde. It's like as our minds are opening and stopped and kind of exploding and really being led down a new path with all this movement with Uranus and of course all the different action that's happening. Is kind of like zombie world or something, like the zombies are going to be floating up, right? So I thought that was an interesting aspect, right? Because we expect everything to be so like pretty and we just want to cover it all up, like just make it pretty and then I don't need to be disturbed. And when all this stuff stops rising, that's going to come back and say, here I am again, I'm bugging you again. Here's our kind of opportunity, and maybe the final opportunity to go, yes, I'm going to grab this bull by the horns. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to finally come to peace with this irritation or this pain that I've buried and I don't want to look at.
There's also a big element in this chart, feeding off what Jen said, of your expectations too. Don't expect anything to look like you think it's going to look like. Uranus is moving into Taurus, and that is expect the unexpected. All this Pisces energy is chaos. For example, and I'm not predicting here, but a lot of people have been going, Uranus into Taurus, Bitcoin and all that stuff is going to explode. Well, it could as easily mean we go to a 10% flat tax, or it could mean the housing market's going to collapse, and it could mean a million things. I'm not predicting any of these things. But all these people who are it's so letting go of certainty, that's the word, because Capricorn is very certain. And there's nothing certain about what's going on right now, which most people don't like. But instead of getting stuck and saying, well, I know this is going to happen, it's putting yourself in a position. You're being asked to kind of embrace the chaotic in a way, so that you put yourself in a position to be able to flow with the unexpected. So, yeah.
Yes, and you know what I was thinking? I just went to look at the degree of Saturn, talking about certainty. So Saturn is at 18 degrees, and I call this the number of the ego. So it's about letting go of your illusion about your ego needing to be in charge. Because what is the ego? We do need our ego, but
we don't want to let it run the show.
That's right. The ego is about certainty, so it's about control, right? It's about I'm not going to let you behave badly, or I'm not going to let you be too loud, or but it's also the death of that, right? This is an opportunity to kind of let that controlling part die. So how would you travel in if you were on a river in these kind of stormy waters or something, which kind of we are, how would you travel? Like if you try to control it, your boat would crash, you'd fall in the water. So the way you have to do it is kind of let the water lead you and make choices when you have an opportunity, right? Like, oh, here's a bank coming up, I can stop here, I can steer it and spend the night on dry water and not go through the night in the dark on the water, on the raging river. Those are the things that we have to learn. This is the reason why we're in fear, right? Is because we don't know how to use our intuition to guide us and listen to the signals and make choices that we feel are the right choices, take the action when we need to, instead of just following blindly along. So this is what all this chaos is about. It's about going, everything you have been certain about, the egoic framework, is going to splatter and break and fall apart. So you better get used to engaging with your voice, your your intuition, your spirituality. What do you really care about? What are you going to save? You know, if you have one of those, what is it, Noah kind of things, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to take on the ark?
But, you know, I don't want anybody to jump into the fear thing of Pisces as well. That's a real shadow of Pisces. You know, we're going to be okay. But, you know, you have to heed the warnings of, you know, being prepared to, you know.
And of course, you know, you get to choose. Remember the two, we have a lot of twos happening around here. Of course, you get to choose which way you go. You can go back into hiding, crawl back under that rock, and kind of just suffer the consequences of other people telling you what to do. Or you can go, right, I want to be involved in my life. I want to feel this. You know, there is very little difference between fear and excitement. We just don't know the difference. And so there is that sense of, we think it's fearful, but you can name it anything you want. You can name it joy or excitement or, yeah, I'm on a journey, and just accept that sometimes, I mean, anytime you don't know something, you're going to have a sense of caution around it or uncertainty.
Your body's natural fight or flight reflex.
Yeah, right.
But if you feel those fear, like anxious butterfly things, and let them float around free, then, and say, this is excitement, let's go with this kind of thing. Anyway.
Yeah. Or I'm getting an intuition that this is dangerous, that I need to sit down or sit it out. You know, there's nothing wrong with retreating when you need to sit in stillness, to breathe, to honor your body and your fear, and then go, okay, I can sit here and be stuck like I'm stuck in this cave, or, you know, for the rest of my life. I won't even know when the world comes to an end, or I can
take the sitting down as a pause.
Yes.
Before taking action.
That's right. So what do you want to do when you're in fear is you want to find a way to come back to center, right? To be centered, like your, you know, we talk about it, our third chakra, which is our power chakra, is we want to find that center there. So we're not being controlled by fear. That's ego, you know. A lot of that is, I don't know what's happening, therefore I'm going to pull out of it, instead of maybe there is something. Maybe I need to know something different. Maybe I need to sit here and come back to center.
Shall we move on to the symbols?
Yes, let's do it.
Woohoo. I'm going to read mine first because I'm quite excited about this one.
Excitement is good.
It is. Oh, so the Chandra symbol for Pisces 16, because we always go up a number from the 15-degree new moon, is a peaceful child on a narrow ledge that overlooks a precipice. Fate has set the pattern. You are held fast by fate, yet inwardly you are so deeply and fundamentally free that you are actually submitting to your fate from a true and pure place. The situation you pull in is outwardly severe. You pull it in, sorry. You are a vast being trapped in a tiny form, and you cannot really go anywhere or do anything to change this. Instead, you are released by your outward bondage to dream, to remember, to envision, and to make cosmic connections. The inner life is boundlessly rich. The outer life is starkly poor. But you live within, make good on the past, cleanse and open, and know that nothing is as it seems, and form is tissue thin. I think that's quite an amazing one this time, actually, considering all we've talked about the material.
Yeah, right. How close it is. How close it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to read mine. And I just wanted to re-emphasize, when I was listening to you, the aspect of the 15 degrees of the moon is the opportunity here to heal thyself, right? Mm-hmm. This is very much a time where we have the opportunity to heal the things that we think are so-called wrong with us, so we can flow into this beautiful,
absolutely,
freedom. So Pisces 16, the flow of inspiration. This is a symbol of the spiritual power which the development of civilization has brought to a point of practical potentiality. and on which each person may draw in meeting any or all critical issues of everyday living. There are illimitable resources in the world of reality around, and maturity at root is a conscious and disciplined sensitivity to these. Woman is herself, as she puts her talents and skills to a real test, welcoming each new challenge to their competency. The key word is ingenuity. When positive, the degree is an exceptional capacity for meeting the unusual developments on every level of human experience, and when negative, disillusions of cleverness and contempt for real effort. Contempt for real effort.
Yes.
Yes. I think
both of those symbols speak to everything that we've been.
Exactly. And remembering this is the key here, our imagination and our willingness to dwell in a place where all is possible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, I think we've probably talked more than enough about this one. I knew we'd go quite long because it's just such a amazing new moon.
Yes, it's a place of freedom, right? This really is I feel like this moon really is a moon of freedom.
Yep. So Jen, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure, you can find me at jenduchenne.com. I'm on Instagram, on Facebook. I have a group, the Light Club of the Woo Woo Weirdos of the World, and of course, you can find me everywhere. I have YouTube, Jen Duchenne.
Yep. And I am Louise Eddington, louiseeddington.com, Louise Eddington Astrologer Facebook page. Planetary Magic Cafe is my free Facebook group. I'm also on Instagram, on here and there when I get time. But if you Google my name, again, I'm the author of Modern Astrology. That's available on my website and on Amazon. And watch out for Jen and I putting a little thing together about Pallas Athena. We've actually had this idea for quite some time about going through all the goddess myths and looking how they can be rewritten for the modern age and from our perspective, astrologically, and from the Akashic records and the messages and all the things we receive. So we're quite excited to start that project, and so look for more on that. And I think, unless there's anything else from you, Jen?
Yes, subscribe.
Leave review.
Leave a review. We love your reviews and your responses.
And we really appreciate you all downloading. The numbers of downloads are just going up, and we're getting great response. We love doing it. It was kind of a passion project, this. We kind of decided to do it together because we were talking about these things anyway, so we thought we'd make them public, and we just love the fact that you're enjoying it too. So thank you to everybody that listens, and again, we do appreciate reviews.
Yes, we're very appreciative of your listening.
Yes, and everything. All right then, so for now, it's goodbye from Lou.
And goodbye from Jen.